Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about issue number 1 of The Ultimate, written by Deniz Camp. But before we dive into the story, I want to ask you a favor. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and a comment to help the channel grow. This issue opens in the heart of a devastated city. The sun sets over a skyline now filled with ruins and dust, following a catastrophic event that has left the metropolis in shambles. So with that said, survivors gather on a rooftop, gazing at the destruction below as the narrator states, "Dear God, dear Dad, you sure made a mess of things, didn't you?" Now on the next page, we pick up 6 months following the death of Howard Stark, with Tony Stark meeting with Dr. Doom and Sif. And as for Thor lay in critical condition following being stabbed by a magical sword. And as for Captain America, he unfortunately is still frozen in ice. Now following that, Iron Lad continued to tell his team that things don't look good, and just to recap their current situation, they've escaped 6 months into the future and thousands have died in the attack on Stark Tower meant for them. And the perpetrators of that attack have created a conspiracy built put of the worst and most powerful people imaginable, and those people have taken control of both the planet and the narrative, so the world thinks of them as violent terrorists. And to make everything worse, the team only has 18 months until the Maker and Howard Stark are freed. And as for their most powerful ally, referring to Thor, he is gravely injured, and as for Cap, he is currently trapped in ice. So with that situation explained, Doom's voice remained steady as he reiterated how everything was indeed a big mess. But on the bright side, there is still a piece of hope that remains, and that is the time machine that is kept by Iron Lad. Now with that in hand, they can still fix things. So with no time to waste, Iron Lad and Doom stood before a chalkboard covered in complex diagrams and equations. Iron Lad, with a sense of urgency, stated, "We have 2 years to fix the world." Doom corrected him with a slight smirk, "You mean 18 months. Doom launched into a detailed explanation of their time travel capabilities and the limitations they faced. "We have a time machine," he began. "But did you understand it? With the Immortus engine, we can act simultaneously in the past, present, and future. You'll have to think in 4 dimensions if you want to change the world, Iron Lad." Iron Lad pondered this, then questioned, "So why stop there? If we can go back 6 months, why not 60 years? Why not fix everything?" Doom's eyes hardened. The Maker's work is not so easily unmade. Events before we disabled his shields are out of reach for now. 6 months is our current negative limit. Iron Lad sighed with a mixture of frustration and inspiration and said, "Okay, then we go back and stop the destruction of Stark Tower. That's within our range." Doom's gaze was unwavering. "We failed to stop it then, so how do you expect to stop it now?" A confident smile played on Iron Lad's lips. "Well, I have a few ideas. Of course, I've been thinking about how to change the world since my 5th birthday." So with it being his turn to speak, Iron Lad's mind raced as he proposed his bold plan to Doom. "We need to create a superhero resistance network that we'll call Ultimates 1.0. Doom listened intently, his skepticism giving way to a glimmer of interest. "We'll create it from the post-human catalysts and files we stole from the Maker. And we will connect it by using Stark Tech and Common Cause," explained Iron Lad. "And at first, we can start small, but in time, we can add additional nodes and grow exponentially." So with that explained, Doom's eyes narrowed as he contemplated the enormity of the task. "You propose we recreate this other world here? This? Earth 616? Iron Lad's passion surged as he replied, "I propose we put right what the Maker put wrong. To help this world become the world it is supposed to be. A world of heroes." Doom's expression remained stern. "This world is not that one. Realities diverge. The Maker has purged himself of mercy. The people in these files are likely dead." Iron Lad, undeterred, clenched his fist. "Then we'll find replacements. With the population data and computing power at our disposal, we can find near-perfect substitutes. Where history fails, we'll let science choose." Now with that proposal out there, Doom had to admit that Iron Lad's idea could work with a few modifications. Because according to Doom, trapped inside his city, the Maker has thousands of years to prepare for their next meeting, where they have only 2. So if they're to have any hope, they'll have to make the most of them. Doom, with a calculated calm, spoke of the Immortus engine. To which Tony states, "The Immortus engine, yeah, Tony thought about it, but he isn't sure. Because there are already so many moving parts to this, time travel only adds further complications and calculations." Now following that, Doom, ever the strategist, informed Tony to leave the calculations to him. He'll build Tony's ultimate network 6 months in the past and have their army overnight. Now with everything settled, Iron Lad tried to call Doom by his real name, Reed, but was quickly corrected because he insists to be called Doom. So following that, Iron Lad engrossed himself in his work and didn't sleep or eat for 6 days. He designed super identities and calculated probabilities, his mind a whirlwind of data and determination. While Doom did the math, Tony designed super identities and calculated the probability of heroism as a function of location, age, psychological history, past trauma, and 244 other unique variables to make a likely hero. And as for Cap, Tony of course solved that problem and freed the frozen hero, but unfortunately, he had to break the harsh truth and told Captain America that the United States broke up in 1969. So with that out there, a distraught Captain America processed the shocking news as Doom and Iron Lad stood by him and offered what comfort they could. Now following that, Iron Lad walked through the facility and thought to himself how this world has such wonders that no one never knew existed. Because among them were real gods like Lady Sif and Thor. So with that said, Iron Lad walked into a room with a wounded Thor lying on a table, tended by the warrior Sif. Now the magical nature of his wound, inflicted by a blade, refused to heal. Iron Lad offered assistance, but Sif sternly told him to leave because it is gods who grant gifts to mortals, not the other way around. So as Iron Lad left Sif alone with Thor, Iron Lad couldn't help but question whom gods prayed to when in need. Now with that out there, Iron Lad, driven by urgency, worked tirelessly for 6 days, preparing for their mission. And for those 6 days, he didn't sleep and he didn't eat, but while he worked, his armor fed concentrated nutrients and proprietary Stark stimulants directly into his bloodstream. Tony also prepared catalysts, calculated trajectories through the 4th dimension, and checked and rechecked their math. And on the 7th day, they were ready. But regardless of their status, not everyone was so confident. Captain America, still skeptical, challenged Iron Lad's plan and said you can't start a revolution from a living room, for revolutions start on the ground. And heroes don't come out of boxes. To which Doom responded by explaining their plan as a scientific experiment rather than a traditional revolution. This is not a revolution, but rather more like a machine or an experiment. One to shake the world. This is science. But unfortunately, Captain America remained doubtful, but Iron Lad attempted to reassure him by saying, there is some very high-level math and engineering at work here, Steve. Hard even for him to understand sometimes, but it should work. So with that said, Iron Lad and his team stood before their time travel device as electric energy crackled around them. The moment of activation was surprisingly anticlimactic according to Iron Lad. Now he did go on to explain the instantaneous nature of time travel, noting that their devices would always have been there. So 1,200 miles above Earth's atmosphere, Tony opened a window in hopes of seeing the world overflowing with heroes, but to his dismay, it looked the same. But Doom, ever the realist, assessed the situation with cold clarity and said the world looked worse in fact. So as they watch in dismay, Tony couldn't help but to think of Steve Rogers as a perfect human. Now in the aftermath of their failed time travel experiment, Iron Lad looked at the screen showing the results of their efforts. Spider-Man and other heroes flickered on the monitors, each facing dire circumstances. He didn't even say, "I told you so," Iron Lad thought as he stared at the images of failure. The screens displayed scenes of chaos, with only 1 or 2 successes amid countless tragedies. Iron Lad admitted his shortcomings, his voice heavy with regret. "Okay. I admit it, I have not yet conquered time." Captain America, ever the mentor, advised caution and said maybe they should wait until they had a better handle on it. Maybe they should stick to time traveling the old-fashioned way, 1 second at a time. Doom, relentless and unyielding, countered by telling Tony he overreacts, because one does not abandon an experiment after a single failure. Iron Lad's frustration boiled over and led him to say, "Experiment, these are people's lives." To which Doom counters by saying they must troubleshoot and try again. Now this was his last straw, because Iron Lad shouted how this was enough. And Steve's right. For they killed people and ruined others' lives. And he doesn't care if it puts them at a disadvantage, but as of today, the Immortus engine is off limits. Now determined to find another way, Iron Lad drew a line through Ultimates 1.0 and wrote Ultimates version 2.0. So following that, the scene shifted to Hoboken, New Jersey, where a new team prepared for action. Somebody called about a bug problem, one of them asked as they stepped off their van labeled PIM Pest Control. The restaurant owner, Mr. Flambe, was unimpressed. Whoa, keep your voice down. I'm running a restaurant here and you'll scare off my customers. Sorry, the pest control agent replied as they squashed the cockroach. Now during their interaction, Mr. Flambe ranted about the vermin issue. To which the agents replied and asked what are they dealing with exactly. What am I, a taxonomist, responded a frustrated Mr. Flambe. So following that, Mr. Flambe went on to say food is going missing, and he got mouths to feed, so whatever they are, he wanted them dead. So with that said, the agents reassured him, don't worry, we'll take care of it. Like the van says, there's no job too big or small. On the next page, we see the two descending into the dimly lit basement as the team of pest control agents discuss their mission. One of them, Janet, noticed Hank's distant demeanor and asked if everything was okay. Hank distractedly responded. You've been kind of distant lately, for the last few months actually, pressed Janet as she continued to ask if he was having the dreams again. Hank, clearly troubled, confessed, recurring nightmares about ants begging for their lives is nothing to laugh at. It's the little personal details about themselves they slip in that's the most horrible part. Janet, trying to comfort him, said, it's just us down here, Hank. I'm your wife and no one's making fun of you. And on top of everything, I love you, I love our life together. And everyone's a mess including the world. Hank, feeling overwhelmed, muttered, God, I'm such a mess, and sometimes I think you'd be better off without me. Now following that, Janet reassured him, we've talked about this, Hank. And I think there's more to life than squashing bugs, if that's what you mean. In fact, I'd like to try bringing life into the world one day. Now this caught Hank's attention and gave him a glimmer of hope as he said the word kids. To which, Janet replied and said, sure, what could be better than that? Imagine our own little family. Now at that moment, the team discovered a small frightened family of moloids huddled together. Now that sight was enough to tug at their hearts to the point where they had to cancel the job. Mr. Flambe's impatient voice broke the moment. Well, did you take care of it? No way, Flambe, you've got moloids living down there. From what we can see, an entire extended family, responded Janet. Okay, I'll pay double, but you do disposal, insisted Mr. Flambe. To which Hank interrupted them and said, sir, they tell stories and they bury their dead. So the best he could do is recommend a humane relocation service. Now this was not what Mr. Flambe wanted to hear, because he shouted that those cost an arm and a leg and take weeks. To which Janet stood firm and shouted, no deal, Flambe, because we don't kill anything with a culture. And ultimately, they have to draw the line somewhere. Now with that said, both Janet and Hank stormed away as Mr. Flambe yelled after them. Now following that, we pick up with them driving away. Hank and Janet discussed the incident, and during their conversation, they called him a jerk, which was something they both agreed on. But unfortunately, his moloid position is pretty mainstream, to the point where killing them's not even a crime, replied Janet. And you want to bring kids into this screwed up world? Asked Hank. The world's always been screwed up, and we'd be great parents, assured Janet. You should trust yourself more, and on top of that, you've overcome a lot, and you're a good man. Hank, filled with doubt, muttered, It's just the dreams, and like you said before, I'll be better after a good night's sleep. Now following that, their conversation turned to a strange dream Janet had. You know, I had a weird dream the other night myself. I was in our apartment, but everything was the wrong size, and our drawers were as big as the Grand Canyon, and our bed fit in the palm of my hand. What do you think that's about? Suddenly, Iron Lad appeared in front of their van and said they needed to talk. Now this caused them to screech to a halt. So with Iron Lad hovering before them, Janet and Hank, inside the van, exchanged shocked glances before hitting the gas and taking off. So as they took off, they couldn't help but to exchange words. Was that Howard Stark? I thought he was dead, exclaimed Janet. Wait, how did he know our names? Asked Janet with confusion evident on her face. So as they continued to drive, Hank started to sweat as he informed her that he would never hurt her no matter what. So as he continued to maneuver the van, Iron Lad followed close behind them while communicating with the rest of his team. So as the chase continued on, Janet couldn't help but to ask why Hank started to act weird. But before he could say anything else, Thor's hammer fell from the sky and crashed into the hood of their work truck and stopped them dead in their tracks. So with the deed done, a holographic image appeared inside the truck of Tony Stark, addressing his message to both Tony and Janet, the same message that was sent back in time. So with the truth coming out, Hank quickly told Janet that he loves her and he is sorry. But before their conversation could go any further, Iron Lad and his team appeared before them. So with that going down, Iron Lad apologized for the miscommunication and said he was sorry about the van, because they're still figuring everything out. So with that out there, we see Thor, standing beside Iron Lad as Lady Sif replies with, "They yet live, how much more gentle do you want?" So as both parties stood there, the hologram went on to say, stealth suits to mask their identities and a sample of PIM particles necessary for them to undergo a post-human transformation are included. And they should have been heroes, but a great evil robbed them both of their destinies and left Henry with irreversible brain damage. So with the message spilling all the information, Iron Lad attempted to interrupt it and catch them up to speed. But a furious Janet confronted Iron Lad and blamed him for killing thousands of people. So with that accusation hurled his way, Iron Lad defensively replied and said he hoped that Janet wasn't one of those people who believes everything she is told. Captain America, ever the mediator, stepped in and said, "Look, I don't have to tell you the world is broken. It's been 6 months, and you haven't accepted our offer, and I don't blame you. Because you must have thought you'd be alone, which is why we've come in person. We wanted to tell you, you won't be alone, and we'd be here to help you, and in the end, you'll be part of something." So with Captain America completing his speech, the voice message kept playing in the background as Janet started to ask questions. She turned to Hank with a look of confusion on her face and asked what they meant by 6 months and becoming a superhero. But once again, before they could finish their pitch, on the next page, suddenly, the street erupted into chaos as Captain Britain shouted Envoyez la Croisade Noire, with 2 giants flanking him. Now in this universe, Captain Britain is one of the members of the Maker's inner circle. So with that out there, Captain Britain's voice boomed and rallied his troops, that was named the Black Crusade. So as the battle was about to kick off, Thor and Sif were dead set on taking the lead, but Iron Lad, ready for battle, shouted no and requested Sif to stay close to Thor because he was their way out if things went south. Now with that said, Tony went on to say, Captain Britain wanted him because he was the reason he didn't have peripheral vision. As the battle rages on, Iron Lad, Thor, and their allies confront Captain Britain and his forces. With a sense of urgency, Iron Lad rallies the team, shouting for the Ultimates to attack. Now Janet, standing by Hank near their PIM pest control van, feels the weight of their future choices upon their shoulders. "Janet, I'm sorry. I didn't want to lose," Hank begins, but Janet interrupts him, understanding his fear. "You don't have to explain, I understand," she reassures him. Meanwhile, Captain Britain mocks Iron Lad by pointing out the destruction they wrought on Stark Tower. So as the battle intensifies, Iron Lad exchanges powerful blows with Captain Britain. So as the fight rages on, Janet reflects on their past struggles. How many mornings did we have to drag ourselves out of bed? How many nights did we stay up terrified, watching the news, feeling helpless, she wonders aloud. Hank, seeing the resolve in her eyes, is reminded of the strength they need to find within themselves. "I'm tired of being afraid, aren't you?" asks Janet as she places a hand on Hank's shoulder. "There's more to life than squashing bugs, there has to be." Now with a renewed sense of purpose, Janet declares that she loves him no matter what choice he makes, but this choice alone is hers. So with her mind made up, Janet activates the mysterious energy sphere, and just like that, Janet transforms into the Wasp, her new suit glistening with power and agility. So with the armor in hand, she immediately took off to test the suit's capabilities, soaring into the air with newfound speed and precision. The enemy's attacks were narrowly avoided before she crash-landed on the ground. But regardless of her near-death experience, Janet was excited and shouted how amazing all of this was. So Hank watches in awe, he quickly realizing the true potential within them. And with that realization, Hank murmurs to himself how he didn't deserve her. Meanwhile, on the next page, we see Captain America telling Hank that Janet doesn't agree with him. To which Hank responds by saying she didn't read everything. So as Hank tries to justify his decision, we jump over to Tony getting hit directly in his face by Captain Britain. "Ah, there is your face, little Stark, I remember it." "The whole world remembers it," laughed Captain Britain as he delivered a powerful blow to Iron Lad's helmet, cracking it. So just as things started to get bad for Stark, Hank stated, "I read them. The files about who we were supposed to be, I read everything. She was supposed to be a superhero. She was supposed to make the world a better place." So with that statement, as Janet fought her own battles, she questioned Doom and asked, how do she supposed to know if they were the bad guys or not? To which Doom replied by saying they're not the ones trying to kill her. Now amidst the chaos, Hank continued to say, as for himself, he's a big mess, a failure, a hero, and a villain. Sometimes he's a good guy and sometimes he's a bad guy, and other times he is just plain old mad. Hank was so many things that he didn't even know what he was, he confesses as he held the orb in his hands. So with confusion in his heart, Hank went on to call himself a menace at worst and dangerous. Because according to the orb, he hurt the people he loved, which is worst of all. And sure, he is afraid of dying and getting hurt, but he is most afraid that if he becomes what he wants him to be, what he is supposed to be, then he'll hurt the people he loves the most. And to that, Captain America reassures him by saying, "I don't have an answer for you, Henry. Certainly no guarantees. I can only say that man is not you. His failures are not your failures. His sins are not yours. And in his experience, there are times that call us to be bigger than ourselves, for the greater good, because the world needs giants right now." Now in the midst of the battle, Thor and Sif engage in a fierce fight against the giants, and with a swing of his mighty hammer, Thor brings down a powerful burst of thunder that completely eradicates the giant. Now that enemy dealt with, Thor was left drained, due to his injuries. So meanwhile, Hank is still grappling with the orb while standing beside Captain America. Now in typical Cap fashion, he offers guidance. And said, no one can make this choice for him, but if he can make an observation. Cap points out how he could have gotten rid of that thing at any time. He could have buried it, thrown it in the river, given it away, smashed it to pieces, but instead he had been driving around with it in arm's reach for 6 months. Now Cap doesn't claim to be a genius, but it seems to him that means something. So as the battle rages on, Captain Britain and Iron Lad continue their brutal confrontation. With a swift and harsh crack, Captain Britain knocks Iron Lad to the ground and stood over his fallen opponent and gloating as he asked who was he to oppose them. Because he claimed to be born to rule this world and all of Europe was his playground, and the East Coast is his newest toy. And then he went on to say, Avalon is also his. And out of their most holy symbols, he made a mockery of them. For he broke Arthur's round table and made it into firewood to burn dissidents. He made the Lady of the Lake his concubine. He took to the Holy Grail and made it his chamber pot. He made sure he crushed the soul of the people beneath his boot. So with his achievements listed, he asked what was Tony next to that? To which a defiant Tony stated that they are the ultimates. And with a powerful burst from his boots, Iron Lad launched himself back into the fight and slipped out of Captain Britain's grip and into the air. And once he was freed, he stated, there are more of us than there are of you. And on top of that, they have boots too. And just like that, Hank's boot came crashing down on Captain Britain and his elite guard. So with the battle over, somehow Captain Britain survived, but regardless it was a statement no one could ignore. A statement that they can see from space. A statement that the ultimate are here and they are planning on leaving a mark. And with that said, this issue comes to an end, as we see the ultimate standing in all their glory with 17 months remaining. So with that out there, if you want to stay in the loop about any individual storyline, then how about you hop over to the playlist section down below or in the link cards above to get all caught up on the Ultimate Universe. So with that established, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please don't forget to leave a like and a comment if you want to see more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next review.